I recently had the opportunity to connect via Zoom with author Paria Hassouri to talk about her book, Found in Transition: A Mother's Evolution Through Her Child's Gender Change. I hope that you'll enjoy the interview.
Found in Transition is my memoir that covers my journey through uh, denial, anger, acceptance from the time when my middle child, who was designated male at birth, first came out to us as being a transgender girl, to when she had her legal name and gender change. And during this time period, while I go through these various stages and she transitions, I also am sort of forced to face some of my own insecurities from my past of being an Iranian American immigrant, and go through my own evolution as well.
Well, what inspired you to decide to share this very personal story with the world?
Well, I think for me, when Ava first came out to us, we were completely blindsided and shocked. And that's because at that time, the majority of stories in the media were about trans people who presented very early in childhood. And so when she told us, we didn't really believe her because she didn't have the story that we had been hearing over and over in the media anytime we heard about trans people. And because she didn't present in what we thought was the typical way, we didn't believe her. We had a delay in access and care for her. And I looked for stories like ours and I couldn't find them. And so I really just wanted to broaden the narratives that are out there about how trans kids present. Once I started doing research and learning more about it, I found out that up to 50% or more don't actually present in early childhood the way media portrays. My goal was to write a story that would also hopefully be interesting just for everybody to read, not necessarily somebody who's grappling with a child who's trans. And I thought if I can tell my story in a way that has universal appeal, then people will just be more educated on the way trans kids present. And then if somebody who has a trans kid and doesn't know it, and their kid comes out at 13 or 15 or 18, they'll have heard a similar story and they won't immediately be shocked and dismiss their child, but hopefully listen to their child, which is the opposite of what I did when Ava came out.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about what happened, what your initial reaction was?
I think my initial reaction was really more denial and anger than actually being upset. I didn't think that there was any possibility that she was trans, so I was more really angry because I thought she was doing it just to get attention, and I didn't have time for that. I just, as a parent, it was like, oh, here's one other thing I have to deal with. And I didn't think there was any possibility that it was a real thing. So it was like, oh, this is something I'm going to have to deal with, and I don't have time, but okay, we'll get the therapist and do the stuff and, wrap this up in a few months and then move on to the next parenting thing that will come up that I'll have to deal with. The biggest mistake was just not listening to her. I had, I, I had always told my kids that they could tell me anything and that there was nothing that they can't tell me and that they can come to me with anything. And when she came to me with the biggest thing she had to tell me, I immediately dismissed her and I didn't listen to her. I wish, even if I hadn't fully listened, I wish I had just said, okay, this is a lot. Give me a day, give me 2 days, give me a week. Rather than just responding with an immediate no, and this isn't possible.
As you mentioned, you went through a huge transition yourself, which is such a beautiful part of the story. And I think that any parent who's struggling with anything with their kid can identify. So you talk a little bit about how this experience has changed you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's changed me in so many ways. I had a lot of my own fears and insecurities that I had been really dealing with for over 30 years. I'm a child of immigrants. We I was born here, but then moved back to Iran and then moved back to the US when I was 10 years old, sort of right soon after the Iran hostage crisis. And so I had a certain amount of bullying, and I'd carried all this fear and insecurity with me uh, for over 30 years. And it was something I had worked on for the last few years leading up to Ava coming out. I had started to work on it, but I hadn't really completely put it behind me. And then having her come out really made me have to face how much the insecurity and fear that I was carrying from my past was causing me to parent her with fear. Um, and really have to just deal with that and finally put that to rest for myself so that I could start parenting her a different way and without this veil of
What
fear.
is the most important thing you would want a parent who's having a hard time accepting or navigating their child's transition to know?
I think I would just want them to know that what you what you think you can't handle and that you can't accept, you actually more than can, and that not only can you accept it, but you can thrive through it. I think this for me has been the most impactful thing that's happened in my life. What I thought was going to be the worst thing that happened to me ended up actually being a beautiful experience for our entire family. And I think when I was in the very beginning, after the anger denial, then it was just terrible, terrible grief like I've never experienced. And when I was in that phase of grief, I couldn't imagine that I was going to be on the other side of it and see my daughter as my daughter one day. I mean, that was my biggest prayer, is let me one day see this child as my daughter. And it did happen, and it happened in at that time it seemed like a long time, but it happened it took a year. Sometimes that seems really long, sometimes it seems really short for you to really change your entire mindset, that and what you've thought has been your child and your family for so many years. So if you just open your mind and open your heart, you will get out of the grief, you will get to acceptance, you will get to thriving. I think I really want to offer hope for anybody who's going through this and feeling in despair.
Yeah.